So my name is Robert. I'm the one who invited you to today's workshop, so thank you very much for coming. We're very excited. We have Eric Bastien here, who's the Deputy Director of
Partnerships.
I introduced him earlier as the Deputy Director of Everything Awesome at SSHRC. You can see me blink at that. We are taping this because there are a lot of people who could not come, so it'll be available afterwards. In terms of for other people, and also if you want to see something that you missed, you can come back to it. So we're very excited to have Eric here, and I'll also introduce Dan Riley because he will also be speaking. He's a senior project manager in the research office, and he will be helping to shepherd the applications through. We're going to go through a lot of information today. We have this session booked until 2. But we can stay until 2:30 if you like. But we're going to get the bulk of this. There's a lot of information to tell you about in terms of what the program is, why it exists, and then how you can apply. It's a very exciting opportunity. It's a college fund to sponsor social innovation, as I'm sure you're all aware. And it represents the first opportunity that the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, here ably represented by Eric, is sponsoring college research directly. And we, as the research office, are willing to support as many applications as the community wants to put in. That means there could be a lot. We've seen about 40 or 50 other people at the other workshops as well. And there are some deadlines that we'll be talking about that will require some lifting by you. I'm not going to lie to you, this is a big deal. Like, it's a big application process. If you come out of this thinking, wow, that's too much, that's okay. Because there will be successive calls over the next couple of years, which Eric will talk to you about. What's important is, you're here, you're thinking about it, and if you don't want to go forward this year, you can always go forward in the year following, and we'll be happy to support you. So I've had the pleasure of knowing Eric for about 4 years. I serve on the SSHRC Programs and Quality Committee, and so as a consequence, I get to run into Eric several times a year as part of that work. He's a big fan of the colleges. He's a huge supporter, not just of this College Social Innovation Fund, but of colleges in general. And he's also a really nice guy. So I think we're going to have a good time. So Eric, take it away.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for attending, and thank you to Robert and George Brown College for hosting us. We're really excited about this. It's a funding opportunity that was launched last month by Minister Older, so we're glad to see it finally lift the ground and being able to promote it and meet the colleges, the faculty members, and start talking about the application process and what this all means. If we go to slide 2. I have a PowerPoint of 40 plus slides, and I'm not going to go through each and every one slide. I'm going to skip some slide. I'm going to underline the most important one. Basically, this is a standard deck that we did at SSHRC for several purposes. But so I'm going to go through part 1 and 2 here and skip the third and the fourth part because Dan's presentation pretty much speak about the application process and all this.
And you'll get this slide deck and all of the other material will be sent to you today.
Yeah, I'll leave it behind, so there's some information in there. So SSHRC, of course, is Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. We support the social sciences and humanities research. And we also, part of our mandate is to advise the government on research. Basically, we do this with 3 umbrella programs: the Talent, the Insight, and the Connection program. So basically, the Talent program is direct support to students. The Insight program is support for research activities, and the Connection program is connecting people together, either at the upfront of any initiative. It can be about meeting people and start to think and talk to potential partners, but Connection also is about dissemination of research. So mostly under Connection we fund workshops and conferences and all this, but it can be used for other things. So here you got the 3 programs with their objectives. We can skip it. can skip that slide too. So partnership at SSHRC. So this competition, the College Community Social Innovation Fund, which I'm going to refer to College Fund from this point forward, is open strictly to colleges and polytechnics. So there's a special envelope, let's say, for specifically colleges and polytechnics like George Brown College. So the idea is to support, and one thing that I want to mention, okay, this call for proposal is reserved for colleges and polytechnic, but pretty much all of our funding opportunity, our main funding opportunities at SSHRC are open to all post-secondary institutions, including polytechnics and colleges. So I invite you to look at what we offer, the Insight grants, the Insight development grants, partnership development grants, partnership grants, and connection grants. There's 5 of them. They're on our website. If you surf our website, you should find it under funding. And also, I encourage you to visit our page, the Partnership Toolkit. If you're thinking of applying to this college fund, you'll need, of course, to build a partnership. So under the Partnership Toolkits, you'll find all kinds of stuff that will help you build a successful partnership. So we put some examples of, for instance, agreement that some researchers have put together with their partners, just to give you an idea of how these people have organized themselves. So visit that page, you can find some interesting stuff there. A quick word about imagining Canada's future. If you're thinking of future research avenue or for your own students, or if you want to validate your own research interest, SSHRC undertook a few years ago a wide consultation, an in-depth consultation with the research community, but also non-academic organization and even foreign researchers and foreign organization, to come up with areas where Canada should probably focus some of its research activities in order to strive in the future. So these 6 areas were identified as 6, let's say, emerging areas where the research community in Canada should pay a bit of attention. The first one speaks to education, so new ways of learning, how we educate ourselves and students and other members of our community. The second one about the management of natural resources. The third one's about Aboriginal people and Aboriginal research. The fourth one, global peak population. The fifth one's about new technologies, of course, anything that has to do with digital media and all this was identified. The sixth one is the global knowledge economy, let's say, and how Canada can strive in a global economic environment. So there's all kinds of information on our website. There's sub-questions that come with those 6 areas. You can consult them on our website, and you can even consult the documents that were produced during that consultation process and engagement process. And if you can't find them on the website, contact us at SSHRC. We'll be happy to provide you with all that has been done under these 6 themes. Like papers were written, workshops were organized, and all this, so you can find all the details of that. The next slide. So it's not SSHRC's intention to set some funding aside and organize RFPs within these particular research area or challenge area, we call them. So it's not our intention to direct funding to those research challenges, but we monitor the situation. We assess what's going on in Canada under these areas, and sometimes we organize knowledge mobilization activities or engagement with the community. We organize some event, or we participate to events and try to showcase the research of the research of the researchers we funded under these particular challenge areas. So the point to underline here is that we're not organizing at SSHRC some specific competition under these areas. And so we have not set some funding aside for these challenge areas. Quick word to say that we fund Aboriginal research at SSHRC, so we recognize Aboriginal knowledge system and methodologies, research by and with Aboriginal researchers. So if you're involved in that kind of research, we do recognize it and we do support it. Next slide, same thing with research creation. For artistic creation that involve a research component, we recognize this at SSHRC. We entertain these proposals and support them. So we recognize research creation as a valid way of conducting research, and we do support it. So the Community and College Social Innovation Fund, the CCSIF, the College Fund, some of its characteristics, so it's 15 million over 3 years that we're going to allocate. That's the envelope for this particular funding opportunity. It's a pilot initiative, so if it's successful, it might be made permanent, but for the time being, it's a pilot initiative. Its main objective, of course, is to fund partnerships research. So let's say George Brown College with either a non-academic partner or an academic partner. So its main purpose is to fund a partnership activity that is somehow linked to social innovation. And we're going to get to how we understand social innovation, but basically is a contribution to social or economic development of communities. The description, the applicant, as I say, this competition is only for colleges and polytechnics and cégep across Canada. So university cannot apply to this program. It's an institutional grant. What it's important to understand here is that if a grant is awarded, George Brown College is the recipient of that grant. So if you're the project director leading a project and you decide to move somewhere else to another college, let's say, or another institution, the grant remains at George Brown College. You could still remain the project director if in agreement with George Brown, if they're willing to accept this. There's a way to work this out, but under exceptional circumstances and on a case-by-case basis, SSHRC would look into this because we need to document that decision. But the main point here is that it's an institutional grant, so it's not an individual grant. The duration, 1 to 3 years, value at up to 200K, plus a 20% for overhead costs, course load reduction, and some compensation for part-time college faculty members. The deadline quickly. SSHRC's deadline is March 2nd, but George Brown College has its own internal deadline, which is February 6th. So for now, the deadline to remember for you guys is February 6th. So, and quickly, you know, when a project director completes its application, he sends it to the research office at George Brown College, and it's George Brown College that actually submit the application to SSHRC. So when you press the submit or send button from your own desk, you're not actually sending the application to SSHRC. It goes to the research office, and then these guys forward it to SSHRC. Competition cycle, okay, so it was launched in November. The deadline is February internal, but March 2nd for us. Evaluation process in May. In June, you should hear about the results, and the start date of your grant should be set for July 2015, with the first payment coming in sometime in July. Yeah, so again, this is an institutional grant, so you as a faculty member would write the proposal, get the application going, fill out all the application on behalf of George Brown College. So you would be let's say, the project director of this proposal. And of course, the project director needs to be affiliated with George Brown College. Institutional eligibility, George Brown College already has institutional eligibility, I think, for the 3 agencies, so we won't talk about this one. Social innovation definition, well, we we have a broad understanding of social innovation at SSHRC. This is how we define it. But I like to describe it as any research that would contribute to social and economic development of communities. So that's for now. Subject matter eligibility. So we have a policy at SSHRC on this. You can read it. It's on our website. Here I'm just going to underline the fact that SSHRC doesn't fund social sciences and humanities research that pertain to health. It's under the mandate of CIHR, the Canadian Institute for Health Research. Although under this funding opportunity, the College Community Social Innovation Fund call, we're a little bit more flexible in terms of multidisciplinary applications. So there is a opportunity here to have a health research component to the research proposal that you're submitting. Before you do, I encourage you to contact us at SSHRC and send us a brief summary of what you have in mind, let's say a one-pager, and we would be happy to communicate with you or have a telephone conversation just to advise you on this. Although we cannot, over a telephone conversation, confirm your eligibility in the competition. That will only be done at the time of receiving the full application, because we have an internal committee at SSHRC that takes care of that, and that will probably look into the full proposal and what's proposed. So there's a tri-agency final administration guides that exists, and basically those are the financial rules that all three agencies in Ottawa are running by. So it serves all three agencies, so CIHR, NSERC, and SSHRC. And this grant is also administered according to these guidelines and rules. However, for the 20%, the 20% that you will be receiving on top of the grant, we have created some specific financial guidelines just for that 20%, because it goes beyond what's eligible under the TAF Act. So I invite you to consult those. So basically that 20% can be used for, like I said, overhead costs, course load reduction, and all this, which is not normally allowed under our financial rules. And just a little parenthèse here or bracket. When you're, so that's important for you guys to understand too, is when an applicant is going to fill the application for the budget requested, we ask you to put the 20% in. You're not required to justify the expenses under that 20%, but you are required to request it, because technically, you know, it's almost automatic that we awarded that 20%, but technically we cannot award something that was not requested by the applicant. So
fear not, we will request it.
Yeah. So at the time of application, it's not necessary to fully justify what this 20% is going to be used for, but of course, during the time, the period of tenure of the grant, you'll be required to demonstrate how you spend that money. That's all I have to say about this slide. Yeah, so it's important to note that under the 200K, the TAF Act regulation, the tri-agency regulation, these are the type of things that you can still pay for, so that can, where you don't necessarily have to use your 20% to pay for this. This is already allowed at SSHRC. So you can pay, of course, for student salaries, consulting fees. In special cases, if you are going to hire somebody under or a consultant, you should double check with SSHRC or the financial office at George Brown, because under special circumstances, and you know, in summary, if you can demonstrate that the expertise doesn't exist within your own research team or at George Brown, a consultant could be hired for a short period of time. Fees paid to research participants, subcontract, and salary to project coordinators. If you're building a partnership, you might want to think about hiring a coordinator to take care of the, let's say, daily administrative responsibility or duties of entertaining a partnership. And that should go beyond what is normally provided by George Brown. So if the job profile of that project coordinator should be around knowledge mobilization activities, so organizing workshop or meetings and all that, but should go beyond what is normally provided in terms of administrative responsibility by George Brown. Quickly on the salary research allowance, another thing that is allowed with the 200K is, let's say you have a partner from a not-for-profit organization. We allow you to take a portion of your grant, send it to that not-for-profit organization so they can hire somebody to replace your co-researcher within that not-for-profit organization. So to release him from some responsibility to work on your research project. So that's allowed, and goes up to 50% of the salary of that co-researcher that's going to be working with you. So basically somebody to help him in his daily responsibility so he can help you with the project. The merit review process. These proposals are going to be reviewed and assessed by your peers, so people affiliated with colleges. And 90% of our committee that's going to review the application are going to be from colleges and polytechnics. 90%, why 90%? Because on our committee in partnership, we always involve some non-academic members or people not affiliated with posting in their institution. So people from the private sector or not-for-profit organization, governmental organization, to look at these proposals. They're in minority, but they're still involved in the process. And only the colleges and polytechnics proposal will be reviewed together. So it won't be mixed up with some university proposal and all this. It's only the proposal received under that call that are going to be reviewed together. It's a one-stage evaluation process, and we won't be using external reviews for those proposals. So it's the committee. And I'll take this opportunity to advise you to not use any jargon in your application and to write it to a broad audience, because our committees are multidisciplinary, multi-sectoral, so they're not necessarily coming from your field. Most likely the reader, what we call the reader A on the proposal is going to be coming from your field or a similar field, or at least know something about your field. But the rest of the committee members are not necessarily coming from your research areas. Evaluation criteria. Basically, all proposals at SSHRC are reviewed under 3 umbrella evaluation criteria. So challenge, feasibility, capability, and all of these criteria have sub-criteria. But mainly, you'll be judged or assessed on the challenge of your proposal. How original is the proposal? You need to demonstrate that in your proposal. The feasibility, so the plan that you've put together to achieve your objectives. And capability is who's going to be conducting the activities, the partners and the individual involved in the proposal. But we're not prescriptive at SSHRC. We fund all kinds of partnerships. So we're not looking for one particular type of partnership, but your proposal is going to be assessed on the objective that you have set for yourselves and the plans you have put together and the people you have assembled to attain these objectives. So again, addressing social sciences, social innovation, it goes without saying, in your proposal you'll have to demonstrate that there's a link between your proposal and social innovation. As I said, we have a broad understanding of what social innovation can be, but basically research that will contribute to the social and economic development of communities. Here, so I want to make a distinction between individuals and organization. It's a question that often comes up in our competition, in partnership competition, because people will say, I'm working with Dr. X from this institution, he's my partner. Well, in our jargon at SSHRC, an individual cannot be a partner. A partner for us is an organization, okay? And an individual can either be a project director, a co-researcher, or a collaborator, but cannot be a partner. It's the institution that is a partner. If we flip. So a co-researcher or a co-applicant can be anyone affiliated with a post-secondary institution, a not-for-profit organization. You know, as long as it's in Canada, it's okay. You can work with foreign researchers and they can be co-applicants, but foreign researchers need to be affiliated with a post-secondary institution. Collaborator, it can be anybody out there affiliated with any organization. What's the distinction between the two? The co-applicants, the co-researcher can access the fund from the grant for the research activities. So you can support the research activities through the SSHRC grant. Collaborator, you cannot support the research activities. So collaborator are more like experts that will come and meet your team once in a while to provide advice on the direction and all this. You can still pay for their travel expenses, let's say, but you cannot support the research activities through the grant. So, yeah. A partner can be any organizations out there. And partners will be asked to write letters of support with your application. So it's important already to contact your partner saying, you know, I'm working on this application, we'd like you to be part of it. Can we sit down and discuss it? And let them know that at one point they'll have to write a letter of engagement, we call them, to support your application. And that needs to be part of the application you're going to be submitting to SSHRC. Through this call for proposal, through the college fund, like I said, our main objective is to support a formal partnership. What's a formal partnership? It's an agreement between at least two institutions, one of which needs to be a college or a polytechnic. So the host organization, the one who's building the application and submitting the application, needs to be a college, a polytechnic, or a cégep, and needs to have a partnership with another organization. So it cannot be a partnership between two different departments within George Brown College. That's not a partnership for us at SSHRC. A partnership needs to be a distinct organization from George Brown College. You'll be asked to submit with your proposal an evidence of formal partnership. Again, we're not prescriptive on what this document could look like, but some evidence that there is an agreement between the two partners. So it can be a letter of agreement, can be an MOU if it exists, but it can be as simple as a letter of agreement, but something that, you know, the partners have signed. And you cannot include in there, in that section of the application, your letters of support. Because we want to see a document or something that all the partners have agreed to. Cash and in-kind contribution, your partners are expected to provide cash or in-kind contribution. It's an indicator of the genuineness of the partnership. So are your partner really involved or committed to this project? So that's an indicator, a very important one for our adjudication committee. Now, it's possible that for some of your partner organizations, they're not able to contribute either cash or in-kind contribution. Let's say, you know, if some researcher that we saw at SSHRC, you know, working with shelters, for instance, don't necessarily have any money to contribute to the project or any in-kind contribution, although they're part of the partnership, they're interested in the activities and all this, but not able to contribute something. If that occurs, you should address it in your proposal and discuss it. And explain why your partners weren't able to make such contribution. How am I doing on time? Am I good? Yeah? Oh, well, there you go. Yeah.
Do we want
Thank
to
you.
take 5 minutes for questions right now, or do we want to hear about the application form? Take a few questions maybe?
It is possible to have more than one department within the college working together with an external partner.
Yes. Yeah, so I'm asked to repeat the question for So the question was, is it possible to have more than one department within George Brown College if we have a partnership with at least one organization outside George Brown College? And the answer is yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Who owns the research and the findings in the end?
So intellectual property. So that's to be negotiated with your partner. But for us, you know, the IP is owned by George Brown College. Although we expect that in a partnership agreement that this will be discussed with your partners, and there needs to be some shared responsibility here with your partners, and need to be able to recognize. Otherwise, I don't think your partner would agree to take part of a partnership. But we leave it to the researcher and the project director to negotiate that with their partners. But primarily for all research that is funded by SSHRC, the IP is held by the project director or the PI or the institution in the case of an institutional grant. But of course, a partner probably won't agree to be part of that partnership if can't have some shared intellectual property. So it needs to be negotiated with the partner.
So we can discuss that in great detail. The college has an intellectual property policy. I would encourage you to read it, and we would follow the guidelines of SSHRC.
So it's wide open. We don't have any parameter to ensure a fair distribution of these funding across the provinces. It's all based on excellence and merit. Yeah.
My second question had to do with, you referred to health, so are you using a broad or a narrow definition? Are you talking about the social determinants of health?
Yeah, social determinants of health usually falls under the CIHR mandate. So SSHRC doesn't fund that kind of research. Although, like I said, under this particular funding opportunity, we're more receptive to multidisciplinary project. So if you're working on something that overlap with the health research area, we encourage you to contact us at SSHRC and send us a brief description of what you have in mind, and we'll try to advise you on that. Yeah.
You can have a couple of PIs, right? Like in terms of a college and a community partnership. And then I'm trying to figure out the co-applicant and PI.
Yeah.
I mean, co-applicant is other community
Yeah.
partners or other...
On paper, we don't allow co-directorship of a partnership. We don't allow it, and the reason being is because SSHRC must L one institution and one project director responsible for the administration of the grant and the project. Having said this, you know, if you're building a website for your project, you can certainly present your partner or the researcher you're working with from a non-academic institution as a co-director of the project. I mean, but on paper at SSHRC, there's one director, one institution. Yeah.
In the case where Allowance might come from a large organization, which is a letter of engagement or what have you from their department okay, or do you want something from the broad institution?
No, from the department, yes. Would SSHRC accept a letter of support from a department from within an institution rather than coming from higher, how would I say, that's a higher hierarchy in the organization? It's perfectly fine. It can be a letter from a department if this department is a partner within the partnership. Whoever has the authority to make that kind of commitment at the institution can send the letter. Yeah. I think I have a question. 1, 2. Okay. So 1, 2.
For the cash contribution in kind for the partners, is there a set amount that the providers?
No, there's no minimal. Yeah, there's no minimal requirement in terms of contribution from partners. So they contribute what they want in terms of cash and in-kind contribution. We do have on our website some guidelines about in-kind contribution. but basically it's important to present something realistic to our education committee, because they're going to be looking at this, and if it doesn't make sense to them, you know, they'll judge that, you know, they won't scratch their head too long, right? If it doesn't make sense, they won't allow any credibility to it. And Dan was saying this morning that there's probably some guidelines at George Brown College to calculate an in-kind contribution, like the salary for if somebody is devoting some time to a project, how to calculate this time. I think
We can help with that.
yeah.
It was just about the selection process. You said you don't actually select based on ideas to like kind of have a mandate for you guys. So is it just the people with the highest scores? Is it like the first 10 that come get it for this year, or is it just like how do you actually make the selection?
It's not first come, first served, that's for sure.
Sorry, I'll be very specific with the question. If there's 10 people that got 5 5s, and then there's another 4 people with 4s, like does it go in like you select based on the order of the numbers?
No, the committee need to break the ties then. So they'll look at these 5 proposals and decide how do we rank them. You see, at SSHRC what we're doing, we score application, but the whole purpose of scoring the application is to rank them.
Okay.
So if we receive 150 applications, they're all going to be ranked from number 1 to 150. We don't allow ties. They'll have to break the ties. They'll have to tell us which one of these 2 or 5.
So if you apply for $50,000, for example, like you only get the money you applied for, you don't get partial, right? It's not like there's no decision made on that.
Oh, yes, you might get partial. If your budget is not well justified, the education committee has the right to recommend that your grant be cut. Yeah.
Okay, great.
So we'll take one more and we'll go to the
Do you have an international partner? Can the primary site of research be international? Or is it just
Yes. So can the site of the research be in a foreign country? That's an interesting question. Let's say the grant's going to be awarded to George Brown College, and it's George Brown College at the end of the day is accountable for how the money is used. We can imagine that some research activities might take place in a foreign country, and that would be acceptable to some extent. There's some rules around this, but there is room for international activities, field work, and all this, definitely. But ultimately, you know, it's George Brown College that will, yeah. Thank you.
Background about what the fund is about, what it's for, the purpose, the context behind it. I'm here more on an operational level from the George Brown side to tell you how you apply for this in terms of applying to the research office, which we then apply as an institution on your behalf. So I'm going to talk specifically about the application, and I've only got a few slides for you, but I do have a couple of templates to show you as well. So the application is a fillable form available online. However, in the interest of making this a little bit easier on you, we've taken all of the different components and put it into one big Word template, which you'll receive later today. And I'll show you that in just a moment. So that and an Excel template is also available for your budget, although we don't have to talk too much about the budget today. We're also going to provide you with a shortened template. So there's 2 due dates. I know Eric mentioned March 2nd in terms of SSHRC's deadline. If you wrote that down, just cross it out. It does not matter to you. February 6th is the deadline that matters to you because that is the deadline internally at George Brown. But before we get to February 6th, there's a deadline on January 7th. So there's some content and some work to be done by January 7th, some background work, some of the initial stuff that you'll need by January 7th so that the research office can support you between that day and February 6th to get your application where it needs to be. So I'll show you both of those templates. But first we'll show you the next slide. So this is it. This is the SSHRC application. This is all of the different pieces of the puzzle. And you can see, or maybe you can't if you're too far back, some parts of it are online entries. So these are things you enter directly into the website. Others are PDF attachments where you just write it up in Word and you attach it as a PDF. So again, that's why we created the template, to make this a bit easier on you, because it's all over the map. But you'll receive these slides. You'll have this as a reference so you know roughly what you're looking at in terms of length and that sort of thing. So if we can back out of the slides, there's a template I have open. The full template and instructions. So this is the first template I mentioned. So this is the full application in one document. So Robert will keep scrolling down and you'll see this is we can stop at this part here. So what we've done is we've put all the different sections of the online application into this document. And we've put instructions directly from the website into comments. So if you're doing a section and you're not sure what you have to put in it, it'll be over here. What we've also done is we've pre-filled as much content as we could for you. So for example, my director, Dawn Davidson, her information is in here as the lead organization applicant because the research office is applying for all of your applications as one. So this is pre-filled for you. The unfortunate thing is that this is mostly what is pre-filled for you. There's not much else that we could do for you. So if you want to just scroll down, you can just kind of get a sense of what is here and all the instructions and that sort of thing. We're not going to go through it all right now. You can look at it if you like. But we'll skip into this and we'll look at the shorter one. So this one I'm going to show you now is the January 7th one. A little bit easier to read, a little bit prettier to look at. So there's 8 sections to this. All 8 sections are required. So let's see if we can make it any bigger. There we go. That'll be fine. So your project name, start and end dates, if you roughly know that. And again, this is only going to Robert and myself and the research office staff. So you can use layman language, you can put bullet points, you can keep it as conversational as you need to. This isn't your application, so it's fine for this to not be professionally, perfectly written, edited 10 times, etc. So these are the 8 sections, and we'll walk through them all quickly. So we'll start with, but before we do that, that application I just showed you, the full one with all the instructions, is embedded here. So if you need it, it's in here, and so is the budget. You can open it up from this document. You can always refer back to it if you're ever lost. But for now, I would say worry about this document itself because these are the things you need by January. So section 1 is your project summary. This is cobbled together from a few sections of the full application. But essentially the challenge or the issue that your project will address. The instructions here are from SSHRC. You can read the full ones if you're interested, but basically the goal, the objective, what is it you want to do? So you should hopefully have an idea of that. You can put in as much detail as you can here, and the content you put in here will help inform 4 or 5 sections of the full application when you get to that point. But for now, just from our perspective in the research office, we need to know a rough idea of what you want to do. So fill this out. We say 2 pages maximum. If you go over, it's fine. Put in as much detail as you have. That's probably the best way to go. And as Eric said earlier, avoid jargon as much as possible. Robert and myself may not necessarily be experts in your field, so define your acronyms. If you're talking about courses, don't put the program codes or the course codes because I probably won't know what they are. So put in as much plain language as you can. The second section is your investigator information, so your information, your status is full-time, part-time, your department, your division, phone number. And then there is a section here for support from your division. So you may not have your whole idea sketched out yet, but if you're a faculty member, it's important for your chair to be on board. Mark, I know you're kind of lucky because your management are shepherding you here. And I think that's the case for a lot of people, is that their chairs have directed them. That's right. I'm not going to repeat that for the tape. Chairs have been shepherding people to this, so likely your chair will be supportive. If you know the duration of your project, that'll help you in the cell to tell them, I'm going for this SSHRC funding. I have a 2-year project in mind. Do you support either, if you're full-time, the release of me from some courses with the money coming from SSHRC to offset that, or my time going towards this project? So we want to get a signature, and if you are a chair and you're applying, then a dean. And it's basically just one level up, so it depends on your status and where you are in the college. But we want to get some sort of support from your division or your department so that we don't go through all the trouble of putting in an application, get the funding, and then you don't get the time to work on it. So that's why this section is here. So section 3, co-applicants and collaborators. You may not have a co-applicant, you may not have a collaborator, you may have neither. And that's fine. If that's what your project is, that's what your project is. But if you do have those, you can put in some of their basic information here. And so we've defined what they are and where they can be from in terms of post-secondary institutions and all the things that Eric covered earlier. So for now, co-applicants, just put in what they're going to be doing on the project. So this is not a lot of content to fill in. When you're moving forward, this gets put in on the online system, and they get an automatically generated email that invites them to participate in your grant, and then they have to log in and do some stuff like with their CV, which we'll get to in a bit. The collaborators, you don't need very much information either. Again, it's just what are they going to be doing on the project, who are they, what's their role. So you can just fill this out here for their contact information, but they don't have to go online and do a CV and all this other stuff. because they're not that deep into the project. Section 4, host organization involvement. So I think it was mentioned earlier that George Brown will be providing letters of support towards these applications. We support them as an institution. They'll be coming either from Robert or from Ann Sato. But to fill in that letter and say what it is George Brown's supporting, we need to know what you need from George Brown. So this could be bullet points. This can be as rough as it needs to be. You don't have to know everything yet. But there may be some things you'll need from George Brown to do your application or to do your project. Maybe it's access to a specific lab space. Maybe you'll need access to a laptop or a tablet or something. Maybe you know you're going to need 6 students, so it'll be a challenge of finding those 6 students. Whatever it is you're going to need from George Brown so that you can do this project, you can just put it in this section here. Section 5, so your KMB plan, your knowledge mobilization. So this is, and it's not from the end of the project, it's not just about dissemination, which Eric mentioned this morning, but it's about how this is sort of going to cycle out to the partner and help them, and how it's going to cycle back in and help the college. And what are you going to do with the outcomes of this project? What are you going to do during this project to ensure that there's great knowledge transfer? So this one might be one of the more challenging ones because it's thinking quite far ahead in terms of the project. But it's good to think about it early because this will help you figure out where your destination is. So the instructions for this are in here. I encourage you to read it. I encourage you to read the whole document. But this section in particular can be a bit tricky, so I recommend looking at this one early. Number 6, so I'm guessing some people here are familiar with the Research Ethics Board. Some hands? Yes, some people? Okay, that's good. So if your project will involve research on human subjects, you will need approval from George Brown's Research Ethics Board to do your project. At this stage, you do not have to apply to the Research Ethics Board. That would be way too much work to do at this stage in the game. What we do want to know is, yes or no, will you need approval from the REB for your project? And if you will it be a full review or an expedited review? So there's 2 types of review from REB, and you can read more about them on their website, which you'll have the link. Expedited review is if there is minimal risk to the people you're researching on. Full review is if there is more than minimal risk. So if you're doing research on a vulnerable population, as defined by research, that's the kind of thing that would take a full review. The duration in weeks here is about how long it will take the REB to review your application. So it's important to think of this now because it will have implications on your work plan and your timeline. As Eric mentioned, the funding will be announced, the recipients will be announced in June. Funding should open up around July. So if you know you're going to have a 2-month review period for your REB, maybe you start it a little bit earlier so that when the funding hits George Brown, you can hit the ground running and start on your project. The rules of the REB, because we are a tri-agency institution, we follow all their guidelines, such as the financial guideline we mentioned earlier. We can't spend any money, basically, before REB approval is in place if it's something that's required for your project. So if the money comes in July, but you need REB and you haven't done it, you can't start until you get that approval. So something to think about now. Section 7, so did you make an online account on the SHRC website, which you can do at this link, and it'll take you about 1.5 minutes. So you could check one of the things off this today. The second thing here is your online CV. So once you have made an account, you can make an online CV on the SHRC website. And the SHRC CV is required to initiate your application. So it's sort of your first step. If you don't have a CV as your profile, that's what you need to do before you can move on to the application itself. The CV is a little bit more complicated than you may think. It's not going to be taking things from your resume and copying and pasting them in. It's a research CV, so it's going to ask you about if you've had any publications, journal articles, conference proceedings, workshops, that sort of thing.
So it has to be for the project director only, or is it for all the collaborators and partner organizations?
That's a good question. So the question was, is it just the project director who has to do a CV? And the answer is no. So by January 7th, yes. We only need the director to do theirs by the 7th, but the co-applicant does have to do a CV as well. That's where they get that email invitation. The partner organization also has to log in and do a few things. The only one who doesn't is the collaborator. They don't have to do a CV. So the answer is both.
So can I also ask you the question attached
Sure.
to that? So you were saying the research publication, so there is a weightage to who becomes the research, the lead researcher on this one, right? Because there is some emphasis, does this person have some experience in terms of doing the research or not?
I think regardless, I mean, maybe you can answer this one better than I could. The question was, is it better to put the person with more research experience essentially as the director? Not necessarily. I think everyone's going to be weighted together as a group, right? It's on the strength of the application. So the director should be the person who's going to lead the project regardless, even if the co-applicant, so to speak, has more research experience or perhaps a stronger CV, because it's going to be considered as a group.
And again, there's just one project director.
Yes. So the question was, is there one project director? Yes. One project director and then co-applicants, which can be from this institution or other partners based on the criteria. So the project director should generally be you, or if you're working with someone within the college, maybe it's them and you're a co-applicant. But that you're likely to be one of those two roles. And then the last section here is partner organizations and contributions. So you may not have this fully figured out yet. You probably don't have a memorandum of understanding in place or any of that stuff, and that's fine. What we want to know is, who do you think you're going to be working with, or if it's confirmed, who are you going to be working with as your partner organization? So you can fill in some of their contact information here. There's a section for their contribution to the project. So what is it that they are doing on the project? What are they hoping to get out of the project? And description of support from that organization. So that goes back to what Eric was saying about cash and in-kind. Perhaps they're donating some of their time to come in and work with you, and that can be quantified, their time. Maybe they're donating materials. There are a lot of ways to consider in-kind. We will send you a list that you can look at, but you can get kind of creative with it. It's essentially anything that isn't cash that they're putting towards the project. So time, donation of materials, access to databases that you may not have access to otherwise. Those can all put a dollar value on them, but they aren't dollars, if that makes sense. So, yes. Oh, and if you are getting in-kind from someone and they're putting time towards a project, it has to be an actual amount of time. They can't say they're putting in 30 hours a week and then only showing up for 1 2-hour meeting. And the rate has, which we mentioned earlier, but the rate has to be real as well, because they are likely that they will be audited at some point. So if they're saying, yeah, put me down for 5 hours a week at $200 an hour, they better be doing 5 hours a week and they better be making $200 an hour, because otherwise that $1,000 you said their time's worth a week is not real.
So a question, you said earlier, or I think Eric said earlier, that there's money that's available for replacement of staff at an agency, so if you're working with an organization. So in-kind is separate from that? Like if we're budgeting some money because someone from their staff is going to work a lot on the project, helping with recruitment of research subjects, etc. So the in-kind is separate from that?
Yes, so the question is essentially, is in-kind time separate from time being paid out of the budget? And the answer is yes. Time that, if a faculty member is getting a release from a course, that costs actual money out of your budget. If a company is putting time in and not expecting to be paid, then that's how that counts as in-kind. So if they're putting it in and not expecting to be paid for it, that's an in-kind donation from them towards your project. If they're expecting to be paid, that's not in-kind because they're getting paid for it out of the project budget.
But also, Anna, to your point, if they recall from Eric's presentation that only 50% can be reimbursed for a partner. The other 50% of the time is conceivably they're spending time. So if they put 10 hours in, for instance, only 5 are reimbursable. The other 5 is an in-kind stack into your budget.
Okay, thanks.
So we can go back to the slides. There's just, I think, 2 left.
Are you going to articulate how you're going to prioritize your George Brown January 7th applicants?
There's a number of us, and we will look at all of them and go from there. We have a team kind of ready for this. It's not just me. It's not just me and Robert, because that would be a lot for us to review. Our director's on hand. We're going to be bringing in grant writers to help people who are moving forward. Essentially, anyone who can get this much done by this day is in good shape. And we will work with them to get them to that next deadline of February 6th.
Is there a number how many applicants Georgetown?
Depends on how many can be put to the level that they need to be by the deadline. There's no limit on how many we can put in as long as they're different project directors. So I think that's an important thing to remember, is a project director can only have one project going in under the institution. So if you have a couple of ideas, try to tie them into one project. The college, though, as a whole, can submit as many as we want. So that's fine. So there's no limit on that.
So one person from an institution can be project director, but that person could be a co-investigator on that other
Yes, yes. Sorry, I guess I should repeat the question. Someone can be a project director on one project and be a co-applicant on a different project, yes.
So if somebody submits a research proposal and it is not accepted in the end, the George Brown thing is absolutely fantastic. Are you going to offer other types of suggestions for funding to those applicants?
Whatever we can come up with.
Or will there be another workshop potentially on those other types of funding that exist?
Yes, as they become available to us. I guess that's kind of a tricky one. Yeah.
So you have 15 million bucks on the table here. How do you,
We only need 5.
now how do you break it down in terms of, is it like zero-based budgeting? Like my research, I require $1.2 million, for example. Or do you have set parameters of how much can be allocated?
So the question is, how is SSHRC, I guess, allocating that 15 million? As far as I know, it's based just on the merit. So they could potentially spend all 15 million in the first year of the program. I think that that's probably unlikely. But if they did, there just wouldn't be funding available. They wouldn't open the competition again the following year. So it's basically, it's merit-based from my understanding. So if they get $8 million worth of great applications this year and they fund them, then great, but that means there's only 7 million next year. And then the third year, maybe even less. So.
How much focus earlier on, there was a talk about push-pull of where the original proposal idea comes from. How much of that is part of this? Does there need to be a description of where the idea came from and that it was generated from communities? Or
I don't know if that's one you can answer better, Eric.
I'm not sure I fully understood the question.
It's a demand-driven program. It requires a partner
Yes.
to state specifically that they will put into practice the results of the work. They'll work with you on it, and they'll put it into practice. Right? It's not for you to sit here and think, great idea, I'm going to do this, and maybe somebody will like it. It's for you to work with somebody who commits up front to say, this is necessary, I need it, and I will put it into practice. It's a good question.
that came from initial conversations about this, so that we are being, the social, the return is there, and that we're doing something that's generated out of the community and out from the agencies, that this is something they need. I've got that right?
Yeah. So the question was, who needs this? Like, does the research need to be needed? And yes, the research, it just wants to be loved. It needs to be needed.
Okay, I just want to quickly just get through the last couple slides because a couple people need to go, and I want to make sure everybody gets all the information. So this is what you need by January 7th. Fill out that template, get online, do your CV. That's pretty much it.
So you're going to need this.
Yeah, everything you've seen today, Eric's slides, my slides, all the slides I didn't show you, but I do have the templates. You're going to get all of that today. So by the end of the day, 5 o'clock, you'll get that in your email. After the 7th, we will do more workshops, and we will continue to work with those people who are ready to keep moving forward. Anything from budgeting, which I think will be an important one for us to assist with because we're more familiar with it than perhaps some of you, as well as the online system, using SSHRC's system to upload those PDF attachments and how to enter in that information. So we're going to do more workshops for those who are moving forward with this. Book a session with Research and Innovation, so you don't have to contact us directly to book one. We'll reach out to those who have what they need by the 7th. But between myself and Robert and our director, Don Davidson, and grant writers and our project managers, we'll be working with people on these to help get them where they need to be. And again, February 6th, this is when the whole thing needs to be done. That is the deadline that we're working towards. So I am going to send all this stuff out today. You will have all of this. But if you didn't register for this workshop, and I do have a list of who did, if you aren't sure, just come give me your email address before you leave, because if I don't have your email address, I can't send you all this content. So this is the list of people who registered, so I guess we can kind of scroll through it slowly. We did it up front as well. If your name's not on here, make sure you come and give me your email address before you leave. I want you to get all this information. I think it's very helpful, but I need your contact info to give it to you.